Okay, thank you very much for joining today's webinar. Today's webinar is how to recruit Powerhouse franchisees without losing your sanity. So yeah, if you're watching this, if you're watching the replay, we're going to ask for an hour of your time. I appreciate everyone's busy, everyone's time is valuable, so you're on the right conversation. If you don't just want a functioning franchise network, you want a thriving, profitable, self-sustaining franchise that actually runs without you spending evenings and weekends and time that you don't have to turn the wheels, something that delivers both financial success and personal freedom. This is a 60-minute session. I was optimistically put this. It's going to be about 45 minutes discussion. So we'll see on that. But we do have a hard stop at 1:00. The replay will be live straight away on LinkedIn. You can chat with us either on the LinkedIn chat or on the Riverside chat. If you registered for the events, we sent out a few reminders with links to the Riverside broadcast tool if you prefer to join us there. This is the third in a series of monthly franchise clinic conversations. In previous months, we've covered mindset mastery, and we've covered 5 steps to a scalable franchise. If you would like the high-quality recordings of those previous sessions, and also to get the notes from today's session, including the slides, and including a high-quality replay for your reference, you can go to a link which I'll put in the chat in all the various places in a sec. pages.franchology.com/notes, which I'll put in the chat in a moment. That will add you to the Franchology list, so you'll get all of the notes next week when we get them out. I will also let you know when we're doing discussions like this in the future. Who are we then? So, Graham, it's that time again where I get to invite you to introduce Franchology. Every month I try to challenge Graham to do this in under 60 seconds, so let's see how we get on today.
I am mildly optimistic, but hey, who knows? As I keep saying, everybody who knows me knows I can talk for Scotland. So 60 seconds. Here we go. First things first, everything we do at Franchology is designed to make a significant, purposeful difference to other people's lives. At Franchology, we help franchisors and their franchise partners to unlock what we would describe as a life-changing, transformative growth. I've spent over 2 decades in the sector as a franchisor, now as a franchise consultant, and some people have been known to describe me as the franchise whisperer. Take what you like out of that. At Franchology, we bring coaching, consulting, board-level insight that shifts performance fast. This includes attracting high-performing franchisees, improving franchisor-franchisee relationships, and increasing MSFs and revenue. We deliver strategy planning, exit strategy planning that delivers stratospheric growth, increased profitability, and value optimization on exit. Programs are also designed to deliver freedom of time, financial freedom, and a fantastic return on investment. Simply put, if Carlsberg decided to franchise, they'd probably engage Franchology. But until they do, I currently have capacity for more ambitious franchisors who would like to be described by their franchise partners as probably the best franchisor in the world. I bet that was over 60 seconds.
Well done. Probably.
Given that tough act to follow,
Good
Ian,
job.
perhaps you can introduce yourself and introduce Chantry.
Carlsberg, the best Scottish brand in the world, yes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. For those that don't know me, my name's Ian Bradley. I've been in the industry for, since 1993, actually. I started a business back in 1990 called Hospital Entertainment. We provided TV and telephone rental direct to hospital patients' beds. A competitor came along, and in 93, we acquired that competitor. And where we have been very sort of London-centric and the Southeast, this competitor had hospital services dotted all across the UK. And so when we acquired them, my business partner and I said, how are we going to best serve these contracts? Do we sort of employ staff and manage them remotely, or is there some other sort of model? And we decided upon franchising. So we franchised our brand, Hospital Entertainment, back in '93, and we went on to win multiple British Franchise Association awards. And we actually sold the business, having already gone into Europe as well, to another competitor in December 2000, and then we floated. We took the business, the enlarged group, through an IPO in 2001 and raised 90 million on the AIM market. So that was my sort of first dipping the toes to the franchise world. I then decided, having sold the business, I'll move down to Devon and take it easy. Obviously, that dream never came true. And I started working with a business called Riverford Organic Vegetables, and we franchised that brand, took them up to sort of 110 franchisees throughout the UK. And then at that point in time, I was also a board member of the British Franchise Association, and I was their chairman in the Southwest for 2 years as well. So since then, I've been working with multiple brands and took some to win some more awards at the BFA and British Franchise Association annual conferences, etc. And about 2 years ago now, I left the present business I was then working for, but for the previous 3 or 4 years, I've been working with Chantry Group. And Chantry were helping me with the marketing and recruitment of new franchisees. And I just enjoyed working with them so much. I approached Chris Cook, who was the founder, and said, Chris, if there was ever a chance to work with you guys, I'd love to take that. And Chris basically turned around and said, when can you start? So I've been with Chantry Group now for just over 2 years, as I said. No, maybe more, actually. More than that, 2.5 years. And so what Chantry Group do, we've got various arms. We started off in 2007 as a sort of true marketing agency, helping franchisors with their franchise recruitment marketing, making sure that the messaging was right, make sure that they were fishing in the right ponds, that we were setting expectations around a marketing plan and budget for the next 12 months. And we would be working with them to make sure that those strategies were right, whether they have an in-house team or not, marketing team, that was. And then as our relationship with those franchisors and the industry grew, we started a lead handling management service. So where we were generating the leads, they would come into our team. We would qualify those candidates and typically drop them off at a discovery day stage, introducing them to the franchisor. We also then have a valuations department where we can go into either a franchisor or a franchisee's business and professionally value that. Those valuations are bank approved by HSBC, by Lloyds, and by NatWest. So that means that if a potential acquirer requires further funding, subject to status, of course, that the bank wouldn't need to go through a revaluation. They would take a Chantry valuation as being a true benchmark of that value. And then lastly, we have another division called franchise business brokers. So where a franchisee has decided that they wish to move on and sell their business, we as brokers will help them achieve that. So I do apologise to everyone. That was a lot more than 60 seconds.
We're going to need to work on that, Ian.
Hopefully you've got some background now.
On the flip side, though, if you got the sense that Ian knows his stuff and you'd like to ask questions, then do post your questions as we go on LinkedIn or the other side, and we'll pick them up. I wanted to set the scene and just talk about firstly about how does the recruitment challenge change across the life cycle of the franchise. So in some discussions recently, we've been talking about how the needs of a franchisee change. Well, in fact, the needs of the franchisor, because the life cycle applies to both franchisors and franchisees. But if you're a new franchisor, then yeah, there's going to be different challenges. And I'm going to perhaps put this first to Graham. For someone watching this, perhaps we can get them to think about where they are at the moment and what kind of the main pressures are that they're facing.
Yeah, I guess in terms of the differences in terms of life cycle, and again, maybe just start here with, if somebody's at the beginning of the journey, I guess the first thing to say is, and this is going to sound blindingly obvious, but in fact, it can even still apply to every stage of the life cycle, is typically we don't know what we don't know. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that every franchisor faces in terms of how do you put together a franchise recruitment strategy together when actually you are, in some respects, having to second guess exactly what kind of type of franchisee is going to be best suited to that individual franchise.
Yeah, because I guess there's a murky element to the future in terms of perhaps it's gaining clarity on where it is that you're trying to get to with the business as well.
Yeah, and Graham's absolutely spot on. Any business considering taking their brand into the franchise world, you need to do a huge amount of homework. You do need to speak to people like the British Franchise Association. You do need to speak to consultants. You need to speak to the banks and accountants. And I would recommend that you put together 3 different business models. One that you target, and that's what we're going to work towards. One which is over optimistic, because let's say the business does fly and you're expanding at a rate of knots than you'd actually predicted. You might need some sort of more cash to help support that. And obviously a pessimistic version. If you've spent all of this money taking your brand to market, whether it would be mapping services, whether it would be creating franchise agreements, whether it would be using the consultants, etc. If you've spent all of that money, then you've got to put the blinkers on, basically, and you've got to think that, this is now our route to market, and this is how we're going to grow and expand our and I think, if you're going to do that, Graham's absolutely spot on. Again, you don't know what you don't know. So you need to use people around you to gain those sort of experiences. And certainly right at the very beginning, in the infancy stage, there is such a temptation to take on the first person that sort of walks through the door. Having spent all of this money, and probably going to need to budget more than you think you're going to budget for. The temptation to take the first checkbook that walks through the door is so tempting, but don't do it. Don't do it. Make sure that all the buttons fit. And Graham and I will talk in a second about what buttons and tick boxes we need to go through. But, what we do at Chantry is that, and we do this for existing franchisors as well, where their models change and they're looking for a different type of person. We go through this sort of empathy mapping exercise, and we go through the exercise of, what franchisees do you really want? What type of franchisees don't you want? And we have this sort of proven product that the outcome of that is we come up with a sort of headline messaging that could be used on the websites, the prospectuses, the portals, etc. And that messaging, what it does, it actually sets the expectations of the journey to the franchisee. So what you're actually doing is that you're attracting the right type of people who want to go on that journey. And that's really key at this moment in time you'll get some people coming through that are really enthusiastic, that are the wrong type of people, and you'll be learning from those. But, you've got to cut down the opportunity of making mistakes by surrounding yourself, by having the right type of people around you.
It sounds to me like there is a learning curve, and we want to shortcut the learning curve as much as possible. The other thought that I had was it's about having processes in place, and maybe we'll get to this in a sec, but then sticking to the process and not cutting corners.
Yeah, I think just to build on what Ian has just said there as well, over the 2 decades that I've been in franchising, again, the simple description is to say I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. The vast majority of people don't set out at all to create something which ends up being ugly. But the facts of the matter are that in franchising we are attracting. Well, that's what we want to do. We want to attract and to award franchises to the right individuals.
Yeah.
Whereas when and I've been in the franchise world where I've had to deal with the fallout from actually selling a franchise to people who have just come along. So, the point that Ian made is well made, because for the franchisor, for the franchise support team, but for the individual franchisee themselves, if you get this wrong, it is, this is potentially devastating. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about people who perhaps will have put everything on the line, and I take no pleasure in having had to sit and deal with people who have lost everything because actually they were not the right person. Full of enthusiasm, yes, but didn't have the ability to actually run the business, and that is not something that we want anybody to have to go through, neither for the franchisee, but nor for the franchisor. It's a lose-lose situation.
So there's, Rob, there's certain sort of checks and balances that, franchisors would typically put in place. When an applicant comes through, they need to be qualified. How do you qualify them? And there's lots of different ways of doing that. You can use psychometric testing a little bit further down the line. Obviously, you can take up references. I think one of my things that I used to do was actually go and visit them in their house. It tells you a huge amount about them, their family. They feel more comfortable because they're in their own premises, but it tells you a huge...
How you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah, messy house, messy business. I've had business meetings sitting around a coffee table where, the dog's trying to chew my leg and the TV's blaring out, and you're just thinking this isn't going to work. And it's an expense, but it's one worth really doing, because it either really cements the relationship right at the very beginning, or it sort of turns everyone off and you're not wasting your time any further. So there's lots of checks and balances, and I'm sure Graham will add to mine as well. One of mine, and you can do all the psychometric testing, etc., plans, exercises, you could do the DISC profiles, etc. One of mine is gut feel. I do trust my gut quite a lot. And
I trust my wife's gut more than my gut.
But, what you're looking for in that sort of what we call bottom sniffing exercise, where they're sussing you out and you're sussing them out, is at the end of the day, when someone's going to sign a franchise agreement, can you work with them? Do they get it? Do they understand the commitment that they're making? And, what's expected of them. You know, you need to have these types of conversations in order to ensure that if there is a problem at some point in the future, you're sitting down with them over a cup of coffee and you sort it out. Yeah. In my experience, if the franchise agreement starts to come out the bottom drawer and they start saying, Ian, under clause 6.3 says the relationship's gone, already. So you need to have that sort of coffee table relationship where if I've got a problem, they can listen to me, and if they've got a problem, I will listen to them. And you just sort it out. You just sit down and negotiate and sort it out. But the key is to eliminate that situation, and you do that right at the very beginning of the journey, where you're making sure that you're taking on the right people.
I think that gut feel can also extend. One of the franchises that I was with, they would kind of take counsel from the rest of the support team. So on open days and things, if we had a number of delegates come in and learn more about the business, it was an opportunity at the end to sit around the table with the rest of the team and just chat through who'd been in and how we, the individual conversations that we'd had. So you take wider counsel from the team as well.
100%, Claire. So at Riverford, on our discovery days, we all went into the field kitchen. There'd be sort of 20, 25 potential franchisees. We all sat down and had lunch, etc. It's all very pleasant, but actually under the radar, myself and my team were, checking out, who's sparking up conversation, who's talking naturally to people, who's sort of a bit shy and retiring.
And who ask good questions as well.
Exactly.
As they've met the different departments.
Yeah.
How engaged they were.
You're absolutely right. And the other check and balance we used to do is that a potential franchisee would go and spend a day with an existing franchisee, go out in their van, go and make the sort of 80 veg box deliveries that day, get to the hub at 6 o'clock in the morning. So they experience what a day in their life was, but also what I did straight afterwards was phone the existing franchisee and said, what do you think?
How did they get on?
Do you think they would fit into the network? And that works all round, that the existing franchisees feels valued, that we respect their opinion. And I get that great feedback, and, the potential franchisee goes out and experiences the real life situation.
It's letting the real situation be experienced, I think. And I think maybe this starts with the messaging and the positioning at the outset for getting the right people onto that day in the first place, but then not making out that it's something that it's not, and letting them speak to existing.
I think as well. I mean, there is a challenge around that as well, I have to say, because there needs to be some expectation management when we do that, along with introducing prospective franchisees to existing franchisees, particularly where there can be difference of opinion, and there is a risk, therefore, sometimes that an existing franchisee may have a very valid opinion, and they may think that they're not necessarily right for the network where other people do, and that's also a challenge, because if you then subsequently still through various means get to the point whereby, yes, there are some challenges to be addressed, but you want to bring this individual into the network, the last thing you want to do is to leave your existing franchise network thinking that, well, you've asked me to give some feedback and actually you've not taken it on board.
They've still joined.
Again, but again, these things can be managed, and they need to be managed. But this goes back to my point about not knowing what you don't know, because it's so easy in franchising. I'm going to say it can be easy to get it right, but it's really, really easy to get it wrong. And
I mean, you've just got to put these checks and balances in place, and you've got to take a helicopter or a holistic view of all the different individual tick boxes that you want, or hurdles, as it were, that you want someone to go through as a potential franchisee. Again, going back to the beginning, going back to the infancy bit, if you are a new franchisor, you want your first 10 franchisees to be successful.
Yes.
If you get 3 or 4 failures out of the first 10, then you're seriously compromising the rest of your journey. Think about it long term. Think about building value from granting franchise territories over the long term period. Because if you're in it for the short term, you're going to fail. You've got to make sure that those first 10 are absolutely flying. They're doing what they should be doing and therefore proving the model. And out of that, you will gain a faster acceleration of growth than if you've lost 3 or 4 on the way. And you can point to your first 10, you can build case studies around your first 10, and you can start giving the next 10 more confidence that they're actually buying into and investing into something that's now proven if you follow the model.
Yeah.
Ian, is it fair to say that when it's your own business, it's maybe harder to be holistic and have that helicopter view because it's your baby in some respects? Compared to you being, let's say, an external expert, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you can't see the woods for the trees.
Yeah.
And it's always good to have a new, fresh, experienced set of eyes within the business. When I set up my first business, I was granted £5,000 from the Prince's Trust. And when you're granted that money, you get a business mentor, and they will meet with you every month and make sure, obviously they want their money back. So they're going to make sure that, that you're going to be successful. But, the mentor we got, we were so lucky. And he actually stayed on, and we appointed him as our chairman, even though the relationship with the Prince's Trust at that point, we paid the loan and stuff. And just having that sense check, having that opportunity of talking to someone who's experienced and will help point you in the right direction. But it's a bit like Graham's point as well. If you listen to a franchisee that has given their opinion on a potential franchisee, then at the end of the day, you're the business owner, so you've got the call. It's your decision whether it be right or wrong. You've got to make the decision. So by all means use individuals as sounding boards, but make sure that your process in your head, or however your decision making process works out, is the right one for the long term, and make sure you keep refining it as well. Having been in the industry for over 30 years, I'm still learning, especially when things like new technologies come around and the marketplace changes, the advertising platforms change, etc. So don't stop learning. Make sure that you're challenging the model all the time and the existing franchisees, because again, when I take on a new franchisee, I say, look, this is a journey, and actually, if our business and your business looks the same in 5 years' time as it does now, then we've failed. You've got to you've got to be prepared to change.
I had a question to ask about mindset. Simon has also asked on LinkedIn. He says, you've used the term franchise partner, but does this really reflect the nature of the contractual relationship between franchisor and franchisee when entering the recruitment process? Should expectations be managed / mindset be managed differently right from the start of the recruitment process?
That's a really good question. Graham, did you want to go first?
Yeah, I think it is. I think for the avoidance of doubt, I think the reality, of course, when it comes to the franchisor-franchisee relationship, There's no doubt about it that the franchise agreement typically is written in favour of the franchisor. So, just stating that to be. However, in terms of from a partner perspective, and I definitely, I use that term routinely. For me, it's not about necessarily in the same context as a 50-50 business partnership, or for example, but I think it is. I think the mindset of having a partner relationship, and as part of that, being really clear that for any franchise business to succeed, it comes back to for me, the reality of it needs to be an interdependent relationship. So it needs to be one whereby, for the franchisee themselves to succeed, that's what franchisors need. Ian's point about making sure that the franchisees are selected and awarded with great due diligence is crucial for me. Mindset, and that's part of the mindset that I think franchisees need to come in with. But mindset itself is also key. And I think that, part of this assessment process is about, are the individuals who are coming through the recruitment process, do they possess the right mindset to be able to be self-employed business owners? And again, I've seen it time and time again, whereby in some instances, the reality is that some prospective franchisees have done, and what some franchisors have allowed, is for them to actually buy a job. And that, can be a really, really tricky situation, particularly when it comes to mindset. And, just to add into that, I mean, two of the two attributes that I would say that stand out for me pretty much above everything else in franchising is to ensure that both the franchisor and the franchisee either have or are able to develop a level of grit and resilience to be able to deal with what is involved in running a business. And what I've seen over the years is that those who possess a level of grit and resilience that is perhaps beyond, certainly beyond, without being scathing to employees, but beyond a lot of employees, they are able to actually get through the challenges and the hurdles and the barriers that are going to be there. And yet, conversely, without having that ability and without having this kind of conversation right up front, including around expectations, and what does that interdependent relationship look like? If we don't do that as franchisors, you end up very, very regularly with misalignment, and that's where when the challenges are coming down the line, that's the route to disputes and whatever else, which is obviously not what anybody wants.
And Graham's spot on with, obviously, the franchise agreement is written in favour of the franchisor, and quite rightly, they've developed systems, processes, a brand, a model that franchisees can take advantage of. But it's also, if you're a franchisee and you can comply with the franchise agreement, you've got no worries at all. There's no issues. And actually, it's almost like an insurance policy. Let's say, for example, you've got a rogue franchisee next door that's causing bad PR in the area, bad, customer referrals and relationships, etc. the franchisor can do something about it. It's almost like an insurance policy that if you can comply with the agreement, you've got no issues, and it's actually protecting the brand and your investment. I think going back to the question is that the franchise agreement is there to protect both people. It's there for both people to understand what their obligations and relationships are, but it's not a human. It's not a human document. It's very black and white, and it's a legal entity. A franchisor and a franchisee need to actually work together to build that relationship, that trust, that integrity, and to understand that it is a working partnership where both parties stand to benefit.
Yeah, thanks. It strikes me that all of this stems from being really clear on your strategic plan and this kind of almost having a waterfall effect from that in terms of being clear on the franchisee profile and knowing if you're going to have territories and so on and so forth. I wondered if that resonated.
And that's interesting. I mean, again, I can think of the first franchise that I was working for. It was many years into the franchise. The franchisor's world, before we actually got what I would describe, we got to a point whereby we created a really strong, robust strategic plan. Prior to that, I don't want to be too insulting and say there was no strategy, but actually the strategy to begin with was wanting, and that led us as a business, or it led them prior to me joining the business, to be very focused just on selling franchises. And that is not at all where we want to be. But the clearer that you are in terms of strategy and having a really robust strategic plan with clearly defined strategic objectives, clearly defined sense of purpose, vision, mission, values, key behaviors, all of those things are crucial, because if you don't have that, then how can you possibly check and balance against, who you're bringing into the network? Do they fit? Do they have the right culture to fit with the values that you've defined as a business? And sitting alongside that, either as part of the strategic plan, and or it could be standalone. What is your exit strategy?
Yeah.
And sorry, Ian.
It's funny you should mention that, because you talk about I presume you talk about the franchisor's exit strategy there, Graham.
Both.
Yeah.
So actually, with the franchisees, one of the things that I learned was within the first 2 or 3 questions of meeting a potential franchisee, I would ask them what their exit plan is. And they would look at me as if I was a complete idiot. And, have you even, invested in the franchise yet? Why you talk about me leaving? And the reason why is because I want to know as a franchisor that someone isn't buying a job, that actually they're investing because they want to build a sellable asset that they can make a capital gain on at the point that they wish to exit.
Yeah.
So, the mentality bit of building a business rather than sort of, and you do get some franchisees that fall into various sort of silos, and I'm not talking down franchisees at all, because they're fantastic people. And one of my motivators in the morning to get out of bed is to help people grow their businesses, help franchisees grow, because I really enjoy, seeing the satisfaction of doing that. But, I want to know that someone's going to build a business and they've got that mentality. And, to begin with, when they're probably by themselves, they're going to have to be, excuse me, a bit of a jack of all trades. They're going to have to do the accounts. They're going to have to be the MD, the FD. They're going to have to be the marketing director, etc. And it's tough. It's really tough starting.
When you mentioned about kind of having that grit, and I've certainly seen wearing all those hats and having to apply the skills you have to some areas of the business that it actually feels a little bit uncomfortable. I've not done this before. You can have some incredibly experienced individuals coming into a franchise setting with years of experience. And I think it's making sure that they're also open-minded, to learning still, even at that point in their journey. There's always learnings, isn't there?
Oh, 100%. This constant change is really important. If you compare sort of where Wimpy was 30 years ago and where the likes of Burger King and McDonald's are now, you've seen each different brand
how that's evolved.
Yeah. And franchisees are part of that journey, and they should want that sort of involvement as well.
Sounds like the best time to fix a lot of these problems would have been 5 years ago. So if someone's listening to this and going, "Oh, there's so much to fix," like what advice do we give someone like that? Is it to sort of map out what your existing network looks like at the moment and where you want to get to, for instance?
Yeah. Going back to that sort of empathy mapping of and the business journey and the type of people that have got the right skill set and mindset to be able to go on that journey with the franchisor. So one of our clients is Revive, and their business model is very different when they started to what the business is now. So we've handheld them through that recruitment journey of changing the messaging to make sure they're getting the right type of individuals that understand what their journey is going to look like, applying for a franchise opportunity.
And I'm just going to build on that as well. I mean, one of the things that's absolutely inextricably linked to what I think you just said there, Ian, as well, and it comes back to not just getting the right individual, but also making sure that I mean, we've got a point here on the screen about territory mapping, and we touched on that as well before. But making sure that we're, from a franchisor perspective, that we're giving the right advice and that they are, they have the right systems and process in place, because, if it's a territory based franchise, and obviously there are franchises that are not territory based, but if it is, and each territory effectively has, a value in terms of what that looks like. Again, there's no, it's so easy to make the mistake of, here's a territory that is potentially, if it's well managed, should be delivering, let's say £1 million. But if you've gone out and recruited a franchisee who's actually really looking for a bit of a lifestyle business and really happy with, if it was turning over £200,000 or £300,000, that would be amazing. Mm-hmm. Well, straight away, we've got a mismatch. But again, these are the things, I think, Ian, for you and I, and for Claire, for all of us, we've spent literally decades in this space, and I come back to, I think we're talking about it because we've learned.
Yeah.
We didn't know that. We didn't know that in the beginning. We made those mistakes as well.
Yeah. I just can't believe Claire's got all of her hair in the same colour.
I know.
Just watch this space. By the time we've done 6 webinars,
well,
we're going to look like Graham.
I'm just going to say, I think Claire's got 1 decade, I've got 2 decades, you've got 3 decades. So,
yeah, I just want to pick up on the third main bullet point there, which is developing messaging and positioning to stand out. And I hope franchisors don't get upset about what I'm going to say, but they all seem to say the same 3 things. We provide great training, we provide great support, and we're an award-winning business. And that's not differentiating at all from what other franchisors are saying.
Yeah.
Actually, from my point of view, the differentiators are how successful your network is, how successful your franchisees individually are. When it comes to them wanting the end of the journey, what value have they built? Looking at potential franchisees coming in and buying their business. So again, that's where the journey and the mindset and the person changes. Because if you've a franchisee and you've bought a franchise for £30,000 and you're selling it for £300,000, actually someone who can afford a £300,000 business is very different to the original person that could buy a £30,000 business. So actually the journey doesn't change necessarily, but the profile of the individual does.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
Just looking through questions on LinkedIn, Simon, I think we've answered Simon's question here. He's saying, why is buying a job through franchising a bad thing? That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing with a resale, isn't it? And then he says, income replacement is just as viable for investing in a franchise as a capital growth strategy. I feel maybe that we answered that a few minutes ago with the
growth strategy is the important bit. As a franchisor, personally, I wouldn't want someone to fall into the silo of being in a comfort zone. You know, I've had situations where I've granted a franchise territory, that franchisee's grown it to sort of 50% of operational within that territory, and they've sort of sat back. I'm quite comfortable. I don't need to employ more staff. I don't need to expand. I'm earning the money that I want to earn. Why do I need to expand further? Well, the whole point of granting the franchise territory is that you're going to exploit it and you're going to make the most of the opportunity. So that's where that sort of entrepreneurial growth mindset comes in, rather than someone who's going to sort of do what they need to do and then sit back and not do anything else.
Because as you mentioned, you also talk about the kind of the end goal and appreciating that can change. But I guess if you're having that conversation at the very beginning about what their aspirations are and what they're looking for, you're getting a feel fairly quickly, aren't you, as to what they're looking for this to be within that territory and if that matches what you're looking for as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need to manage their expectations. If they think they can buy a business for 30,000 and sell it for 300,000 within 2 years, no, it's not going to happen. So you can pull out the information from them in certain ways that you can then help them set their expectations, so that no one's going to get upset on the journey, because everyone knows what their journey entails.
It's nice and clear. Yeah, absolutely.
I had a thought pop into my head on the messaging that my background in ads kind of says, well, don't say the stuff that's kind of a given, like the award-winning. It's like if the opposite couldn't also be a benefit, so you wouldn't say unaward-winning or not award-winning. So there's no real point of difference in it. So maybe it is about sort of showcasing, well, what are the eventual possibilities that you might end up in with the franchise opportunity.
Yeah. And that messaging becomes stronger, as per the journey of the franchisor, because you've got real life experience, rather than starting out as a virgin franchisor, not really knowing, you haven't got a crystal ball. You've got mentors and people that can help and advise, but really no one's got a crystal ball as to what really the journey is going to look like. Because as a franchisor, you may have built up a strong brand and business within your local area, but is it going to work in Dumfries or Cornwall or whatever? Is it going to work remotely? There's so many challenges that by using experts, you're minimizing those, but you still really don't know, and you're going to have to be flexible and take that flexible approach.
Yeah, Simon's saying, why us? Why now? was the key message and positioning statements that attracted me to my franchise back in the day. I didn't care how many awards they had won or the size of so,
yeah, very true.
Brian says the journey is often best explained and sold, in air quotes, through case studies. So that's something people should do as well.
Yeah, I think not just case studies, but I mean, certainly, again, my own experience is that every single franchisee who has come into businesses that I've been involved in, either as a franchisor and or as a consultant, they want to speak to people as well. They want to speak to existing franchisees to be able to really get a sense. So again, yes, case studies, testimonials, absolutely crucial. But having that ability as well, so that they can do that in an open and transparent way, I think is also very important.
Yeah.
Just on the last point of looking at external expertise, what would be the next steps for someone wanting to get help in? And is there a use case for kind of rolling up your sleeves and doing it yourself, and then points of benefit for saying, okay, it's time to contact Chantry, for instance? At what point does that become?
I'm not going to sit here and sell Chantry, but what I will sell is the British Franchise Association. You know, the BFA are a membership organisation, and you're only granted membership if you sort of an ethical franchisor, your financials stack up. They do a lot of homework and due diligence before granting you the membership. And it also means that, not only are you an ethical franchisor right at the beginning, but, the checks and balances are in place throughout your journey. So if anyone's considering franchising their brand, then visit the BFA website, which is bfa.org, and you'll find lots of consultants, lots of lawyers, lots of accountants. You'll find some marketing agencies, etc. on there. So that's your best, safest place to start, is where the industry know each other and trust each other. Would you say, Graham?
100%, yeah, definitely. And I think that the BFA as an organisation, under the leadership of Pip, that the organisation is constantly striving to improve, exactly what you've just described as well. So it's not that anybody's sitting resting on their laurels. Where I think with the BFA and with the BFA members, of which I know we both are, we're all striving for excellence and in what is still an unregulated market in franchising in the UK.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put the link in the chat, thebfa.org. If you just put bfa.org, it takes you to a Bible association. So
we might need that as well.
You might need that as well. We're pretty much at the end of time, guys. So I'm just going to say to anyone who's watching, if you have got questions for Ian or Graham, put them in the chat. Graham, perhaps you could talk through the benefit of initiating a holistic review and what that would give to someone watching.
Yeah, sure. So it actually goes back, Rob, to the point that you made just a few minutes ago, I guess, that quite a few minutes ago now. What do you do if you're an existing franchisor who's perhaps already, on that journey, but sitting thinking, wow, I wish I knew then what, perhaps what I know now, or some of the things that maybe we've shared today. So one of the things that we've done at Franchology is to put exactly that, put a service together, which is a holistic review of the whole franchise business. Franchisors can avail themselves of that at any stage of their life cycle. And I've done that, and I've put together a range of partners as well. So strategic partners who are part of that review process. So it's not just me as an individual, that strategic partnership team along with me, whereby we would literally lift the bonnet of any franchise, go through a process of looking at absolutely everything and providing franchisors with a recommendation report at the end. So, where things are absolutely running smoothly, with a score alongside each of those things, if you're 10 out of 10 on X, Y, Z, we'll confirm that you're 10 out of 10. But if there's things that perhaps you need to consider and review, and that could be things that you can review and make changes yourself, and or if you feel that you need support, then there's additional support there and guidance, whether that's in a coaching, consulting, mentoring, training, whatever. But yeah, so that's out there and readily available as one of our services.
Simon's just asked, what are your thoughts on allocating budget to recruit franchisees? Is it as simple as cost per deal times the number of franchisees you need?
I'd be very happy to reach out and speak to Simon, but the BFA do a sort of annual survey with WorkBuzz and some of the stats in there on franchise recruitment, really interesting. Typically, you need to invest sort of £5,000 to £7,000 worth of marketing to recruit one new franchise partner. Typically, the numbers are still around 100 inquiries to signing one franchise partner. Obviously, more established brands are lower than that, perhaps in the 80s. More newer brands will probably be 120, 140 inquiries per sign up. So, if you think about a 12-month plan, and this is something that we do, is that we understand the business, we make sure that you're fishing in the right ponds with the right channels, and then depending on what your aspirations are in terms of number of franchisees you want to recruit, we will build a 12-month marketing plan and budget alongside that to ensure that we're attracting the right number of inquiries that should convert into the number of franchisees that you wish to take on. But yeah, those are the kind of numbers that you're looking at in general.
Very good. Claire, you've been listening along. I have to apologise as well. I didn't introduce you at the start. So Claire is the operations director of Franchology. Is there any questions that come to mind for you based on what we discussed?
No, not off the top of my head. I really enjoyed that. So my experience being mainly around kind of non-territory based, it's interesting to kind of discuss the other aspects of, and yeah, just some of the benefits of having that too.
Super. We will, as mentioned at the start, we will collate our notes from this discussion. We've obviously got various threads. We'll get a document out to everyone who wants it next week. I did put the link in the chat to that. I might just repost it again. But yeah, if you'd like the notes, either just send one of us a direct message or follow the link I'm going to post in a sec. And we will do this again next month. Date and topic is currently to be confirmed. So yeah, once you're on the list, you'll also get a notification when we...
It would also be really good if anybody has any specific topics that they would like us to cover, then please just reach out to Graham or myself, because yeah, we want to cover more of what you want to hear about. So let us know. What's
the unsolvable franchise problem?
What's the next burning topic?
Yeah, we like the tricky to solve ones.
We do. Yeah. That'd be good fun.
Yeah. But yeah, it's 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to say thank you. We've still got 7 people on, so thank you for joining us, watching us this far. Feel free to, if you've been watching the replay, feel free to carry on posting questions on the video. We will comments, post replies after the fact, and yeah, feel free to reach out to both Graham and I want to say thank you to Ian as well for being our guest today.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Ian.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Good stuff.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Okay, that is a